All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. I'm Dave, and we also have...
This is Paul.
Hey guys, and this is Lincoln Parks here, joining you from Atlanta, Georgia.
How about you, Paul? Where are you at right now?
I'm currently from Portland, Oregon.
Okay, awesome. And I am in Detroit, actually just outside Detroit, in Dearborn, Michigan. So if anybody's live on the call right now, go ahead and chat or type in the chat box where you're coming from. So I'll start. Just gonna right there. And if you're jumping in the next few minutes or whatever, feel free to type in where you guys are located.
All right. Great. So we're representing the East Coast, Central, and the West Coast, all in one webinar.
Yeah, pretty cool. Well, great, guys. Thanks for joining us, and for those of you that will be listening to the recording, thanks so much for signing up. Our hope is that you will really just be inspired by the stories you'll hear today and the content that we'll share about faith and calling in the marketplace. And feel free to, as we go through this material, if you're live, you can type in to the chat box questions. We can get to the questions at the end of the webinar, or if you want to share just kind of where you're at, what type of job you have, or what you sense your calling is, and we'd love for you to share that. And then we will have some Q&A time at the end of the webinar, so we'll save some time for that. And then in addition, we'll have access to our emails and so forth, that you can send us messages later on if you have questions. So hey, okay, great. We have some people jumping in. Got Cleveland, Tennessee, Richmond, Virginia. Awesome.
Yeah, we have Scott. We see you on there. Chandler, we see you on there. Charles from Jacksonville, Florida.
Okay.
Indianapolis, Indiana. Scott, welcome, guys, to the webinar.
Yep. Cleveland, Ohio. So we have two Clevelands, one Tennessee and one Ohio. Awesome. So great, guys. Well, thanks so much for being here, and we're just going to share just a few minutes, a little tidbit about ourselves. I'll go ahead and start. So my name's Dave Arnold, and I've been in leadership roles for the last 15 years in mostly ministry settings. So in churches, I started off as a youth minister, and then was a college minister. I did small groups. I did young adults, associate pastor, and then I started my own church in the inner city of Chicago, and I've worked in urban context for the last almost 10 years. And we were in Chicago. God really just kind of opened our eyes to a lot of the needs of the poor, the economic struggles that many people face in living in the inner city. And so we were able to work with families and also with refugees, folks coming from war-torn countries like Sudan, Somalia, and then Iraq after the Iraq War, and a lot of Iraqis started coming to the cities in the U.S. And so really interesting and also challenging experience. And then I worked as a case manager, so I have some involvement, some experience with the nonprofit world, doing case management, working with refugees and immigrants, mostly helping them to adjust. I was like an adjustment counselor, basically, helping people adjust to their new life in America. And then 2 years ago, just a little bit less than 2 years, moved back to the Detroit area where my wife's originally from. And that's when I really kind of ventured out on my own to start my own business, to really focus on my writing, to kind of hone that in. I got a publishing deal with Urban Law Publishers in Portland, Oregon, and my book came out in 2013, and then self-published the book as well. And then I started doing life coaching, and now I'm speaking mostly at churches and some other events locally, and then a little bit in different states here in the U.S. So I'm married. I have 2 kids, a 4-year-old boy and a 4-month-old girl. So our house is lots of fun and a lot of activity. So, okay, Tag, who's next?
Hey, hey, this is Lincoln Parks, and I want to thank you guys for joining. You probably can't see me right now. Let me go ahead and take off the screen share right now, so you guys can just see me, and that way you can know who I am. Lincoln Parks. I was born and raised in the Bahamas, so I moved to the United States probably when I was 19, probably over about 20 some years ago. And throughout my life, I was an athlete in school, and a lot of my parents, a lot of people told me, a lot of teachers told me, that I was going to fail in whatever it was that I did, because I was just focusing on one thing at that particular time. My mom always told me when she passed away, she was 15, I was 15 years old, and when she passed away, she told me, never let anybody tell you that you can't do something. And that just stuck with me throughout my entire life. And throughout my corporate career and working years in corporate America and a technical aspect, a couple of years ago, I was laid off from corporate America, and they just walked me out, and our positions were eliminated. And I had to decide at that point. When I got home, I drove up. My wife told me she knew exactly what had happened. The first thing we did was drop down on our knees, and we started to pray, to ask God, what's my calling? What do you have for me? What am I supposed to be doing? At that time, I was really angry, and because I didn't know which direction I needed to go in. But God gave me. He gave me a message, and he told me, you need to go use your passion and the talents that you already have to help other people, get started in business, to become an entrepreneur, to market themselves. And that's what I've been doing over the past 4 years, really just out in the community, really helping a lot of people, individuals and businesses. And it's just a passion that I have. And, God has just led me to really just pour into others, and also learn as well, because there are people that I'm around constantly, like Paul and like Dave, where I can constantly learn from them. So I just wanted to share a little bit of my story, and now I'm going to pass it all over to you, Paul.
All right, thanks, guys. So my name is Paul Son. I was born in Seoul, Korea, and I was raised in 3 different countries, Korea, Canada, and the United States. So a lot of moving as I was growing up. 4 years ago, I graduated from my undergrad studies at University of British Columbia, where I specialized in organizational development and leadership. So when I graduated, I was pretty much in the middle of the Great Recession in the North America, pretty much in the world, and it was very hard for me to just try to find a job and to think about what is the next step for me. But I applied to a lot of different companies and internships, but thankfully I landed an internship position at a Fortune 50 company in the United States, and from there I have been working in our lean department, where we do a lot of process improvement types of work, continuous improvement type of work. And from there, I felt initially at work very disillusioned from what I was doing, because a lot of the work I was doing was not related to what I studied in college. So throughout this webinar, I'll kind of share my story around how I tried to find a sense of calling and fulfillment into work I was doing, and how I was able to overcome that process. And from there on, God has opened a lot of doors of opportunity for me, and has given me a sense of passion for leadership and coaching. So I've been doing a lot of that with the blog that I have called Salt and Light, as well as a lot of these other exciting opportunities that I've been starting with leadership coaching as well. So I hope that all of you who are here today will really think about what is God's calling in your life right now, and what can you do to discover that, develop that, and unleash that calling to grow to your maximum potential. So I'm very excited for to share our stories together.
Awesome. Well said, Paul. So we're going to continue on. So basically, and Paul just kind of touched on that, our hope for this webinar is that, and actually we really feel like this is our promise that we want to give to you, is that at the end of our time together, you will have clear ideas and action steps that you can take to identify your calling and how to live that out. And wherever you're at, and maybe you're in a job that you don't really feel like that's your passion, and you're not really sure how to take steps toward fulfilling the dream that you have and the calling that you feel. We hope that, as Paul mentioned, that we can help you unleash that, because I think that there's power in hearing from others that you can do it, that you can do that, it's possible. And that's something that was a message I heard. It took me a while. I'm a little slow to learn at times, but it was a process that people kind of invested in me and said, Dave, we know that you can do more, that you have more within you. And so we want to inspire you and to evoke within you a sense of purpose and calling, that you are placed on this earth for a reason. That God has you here, 21st century, and there's crazy opportunities with the social media and the internet that we have to really make a difference and to use your voice to make an impact. So our hope is that you'll have some clear, actionable steps that you can take to from this webinar. So here's our problem, and it's always good to start off with the problem that we all face. We live in a consumeristic culture, right? We live in a world that tells you that if you do these 7 steps, then you'll have instant success, because we're told that we have everything instant, right? Instant Wi-Fi connection. You can drive through McDonald's and get your burger, instantaneously. The problem with that is when it comes to purpose and calling, it's not instant. It's a process, and sometimes a painful process, sometimes a very frustrating process. And one of the things that you'll hear maybe later is that oftentimes the people who are doing the most in this world, that are making the most difference, are doing that because of the pain and the struggle and the perseverance that they've had to endure. So there are usually 2 categories that we've been given, or we are taught, preconceived ideas that we have about calling, especially from a Christian perspective. And we're coming from a Christian perspective. Myself, Paul, and Lincoln are all believers in Christ and seek to follow Him. And those 2 categories are usually, one, that in order to really make a difference and do something that's faith related, you have to be a pastor. You have to do, have some kind of training, ministry training, seminary, Bible college. And then the second one is, let's see, I lost my notes. Do you have that screen back up there, Lincoln? Thank you. The second one is missionary. So, sell everything you have, go overseas, and live with a different culture or whatever. And so obviously some people are called to that. In fact, my wife and I have friends that worked in corporate America, and then after they retired, they said, hey, we want to go in the mission field. We want to give back, and that's awesome. But usually those 2 categories can kind of hold people back, because you think that you have to jump through certain hoops or have certain experiences before you can start using your gifts and talents for the Lord and for doing great work that really impacts people. And that's just not truth. So we hope to debunk some of that a little bit today. So go ahead, Lincoln, if you want to jump in and share a little bit about your story and how that has worked for you.
Absolutely. Well, guys, I just wanted to share really quickly with you guys, and I'm going to tackle myth number 1 here, where it says, starting a business online and working from home is stress-free, and you can sort of coast, and how you can make money and love God unconditionally. And there's I always want to refer back to Scripture, we're talking about Matthew 25:14 through 30. For it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted them to his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 more talents. So he who had 2 talents made another 2 talents more. But he who had received 1 talent went and dug it in the ground and hid his master's money. So when I read that, and just coming from the perspective when I told you guys that I was laid off that day, I came home, and my wife and I we just immediately prayed. She had felt something from before. When I was at work, she knew. She said there was a feeling that came over her that day, that she knew something was going to happen. And when she heard that garage door go up, and coming back home at like 10:30 during the day, she knew immediately what had happened. And we just got on our knees, we started praying, and just asking God, where are you going to take us? What are we going to do? And I know that I had talents, because people would always ask me the questions, hey, how do I do this online? How can I get my business online? There's something that I'm passionate about, and I wrote a book, but I don't know how to market it. Or I'm starting a blog, and I want to know the best tools. Or what about hosting, and getting really technical. And I knew that I had these skills, but I didn't know how to put them to work for God. I didn't know, what could I do? Because to me, it just came as second nature. But then when a lot of people started asking me these questions, I found out that this was a talent that God had actually given me, which is why it appears to other people that it comes so easy, but I had to really study and do a lot of work to gain the knowledge, and consistently doing that every day. So, I just want to debunk that myth that it's whatever God has blessed you with, those talents that you have been blessed with, that not to take those lightly, and to tap into those, and also study and do the work, and take the courses, and go out and really discover how you can help other people with your talent. So it's been something that I am still really cultivating to this day, and really just allowing God to take control of every single thing that I do, every decision that I make on a daily basis. It's a constant struggle, and having to keep the word in front of me every day. And it's just been what I have to say, right now, is over the past 4 years, it's by no stretch of the imagination has it been easy, and it's still not easy to this day, because if I don't do anything or go out to help and try to bless people, then nothing's going to happen for me. So without works, you can't, the faith that you have that it's going to happen for you, if you don't actually do anything, then nothing's going to happen. So that's what I wanted to share with you guys on that myth.
Well said. And one of the hopes that we can really share with you guys today is that myself and Paul and Lincoln, we consider ourselves ministers. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm vocationally a minister, but doesn't mean that Paul working in corporate America and Lincoln with his business are not doing ministry. In fact, they are. And I hope that you can really catch this, because if you're following Jesus, if you're a follower of Christ, that means you've been entrusted with a specific task or tasks. That means that you are called to do the work that God wants you to do, which is basically being a minister of that, being a steward, just like he read in Matthew. So let's stop and define ministry real quick, and then Paul's going to share here in a minute. But ministry is the act of allowing God to first and foremost work in your life, so that he can use you to be an instrument of blessing to the world around you. So Lincoln just talked about blessing people. A true calling will push you out of yourself and cause you to be a blessing, literally spill out of you to bless other people. And that's something that we're all passionate about, all three of us. And so So ministry involves two things, two P's, as I like to say, posture and position. The posture is your willingness to allow God to work in your life. We refer to this as spiritual formation. So that's the first step. You got to be willing to say, God, use me, just like Lincoln said. I'm going to do the work. I'm going to do what I need to do, but use me to do what you want me to do, the work that you've called me to do. I open myself up to you. I submit myself to you. I allow you. I align myself to you. And I think it's in Proverbs. It says, many are the purposes of a man or woman's heart, but it's ultimately God's purpose that prevails. And that's so true. That's where posture comes in, that humility, that sense of willingness. And number two is position. Is now that you're humble and willing to say, yes, here's my life. Use me, align me. Now, here's my gifts, my talents, my experiences, my personality, and use that, position me to be a blessing to others and to make a difference. So that's the two, what I like to say, the two P's of ministry. So take it away, Paul.
Sure. So as I was really thinking about vocation, my calling, I came across a very interesting word in Hebrew called avodah. And avodah actually means work, but also has the meaning of worship as well. So I think when we think about our calling and the vocation God has given us in our lives, it is not merely just a job or a career where you derive satisfaction from the things that you get from building a career, but you got to think about that as more of a vocation where God has purposefully orchestrated this time and place and work to really glorify God in the gifts that He has given you. So I think for me, just working in the company I've been working for the past 4 or 5 years, what comes to my mind is how can we be the salt and light of this world? And first and foremost, I think as Christians, we need to embody the values of Christ. We need to love our neighbors as ourselves, and we need to use our speech and our behaviors, our actions that really would mirror what Christ did 2,000 years ago. So I think that attitude, that foundation is key. But apart from that, I think what we could do to glorify God is to be very competent in what we do. So whether if you're accountant, or whether if you're an entrepreneur, or if you're an athlete, whatever you're doing, you need to do it best, because God has given you a sense of calling and a gift and a talent, and it is our obligation almost to turn that into a strength. And as we excel in that field, that is one way people will show respect and will have greater influence as well. Another aspect I think is really critical is having integrity, having just a sense of strong character, compelling character that follows what Christ has done. Because I've seen a lot of successful people who have the skill sets, who has a lot of influence, but deep within them, the underlying motive or intention is all about themselves. They don't serve. It's about glorifying themselves, and you can kind of see through that process. So as Christians, we got to think about what is our mission? What are we here to do? And because God has placed you in that place for a reason. So we got to think about what can I do to use my gift sets and talents to serve others and to glorify God.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So let's jump to myth number 2, debunking the myth as far as understanding our calling. And that is the myth of qualification. And this is a big one. I think this is a one that holds people back from unleashing their potential and a sense of purpose. Because a lot of us, all of us, I think, if we're honest with ourselves, we just don't feel like we've got what it takes, right? Our fears beset us, our insecurities, we compare ourselves to others. I mean, let's face it, we live in a culture that, exalts celebrities and, the American Idol phenomenon where somebody can become instantly famous overnight. And we're just like, oh, I don't have what it takes. I'm just an average, Joe who's just whatever, doing my job, doing my thing. And, that myth of qualification is a big one. And so I think when it comes specifically to, as Paul mentioned, about using your gifts and your talents for God's purpose on the earth, a big one is that I'm not educated. I don't have enough knowledge. And if it's from a Christian perspective, it's I don't have enough Bible knowledge, right? And if you read the stories of the Bible, and we'll talk about this a little later, you'll see a lot of people, that was one of their arguments when God called them to do his work. They were like, I don't know. I don't know enough. Moses, I'm not a good speaker. And what did God say? Moses, I called you. I'll speak through you, right? That's the point. We have to get out of the way. And qualification, education, degrees, doctorates, how much experience we have really doesn't matter in God's eyes. I mean, it matters. Don't get me wrong. It's important. Not to say, that we should just toss out education and so forth. But as far as a qualifying factor, it doesn't matter. Because what's most important is our hearts. Are we open? Are we willing to allow God to use us the way he wants? So the thought may be, oh, I never went to seminary. I didn't go to Bible college. I didn't grow up in a faith background, and that's really my story. I didn't grow up in a Christian family, and I came to faith later in high school, and God just through his providence directed me to a small Christian college in the Midwest. I grew up in the D.C. area, outside of Washington D.C. in Virginia, and found myself 630 miles away in Fort Wayne, Indiana, at a small Christian college. And I remember when I first got to campus, and I met all these students, and they were all, telling stories about themselves, and they were like, they knew, at least it appeared to me, they knew all these Bible, stories and Bible verses. They had strong Christian families. I didn't grow up in a Christian family. My parents divorced, so I was lacking that foundation and structure. And they knew all these Christian. I mean, I didn't know DC Talk. I mean, this is back. I'm dating myself a little. This is back in the mid '90s, right? DC Talk was really popular, and I didn't know any of these Christian artists, and I just felt like, what am I doing here? And I remember just feeling like, God, maybe this is the wrong place for me. I'm not qualified. But you know what? Through that, God really opened my eyes so much. And I remember my first job. I was a youth pastor, and I worked in the Detroit area, and for whatever reason, a lot of the kids that came to our meetings were from, pretty rough backgrounds. Some from inner city, some from broken families. And I remember sitting across the table from this kid, a young teenage boy who was just really angry. And as I found out, he was just angry at his dad. Haha, I love DC Talk. Thanks, Chandler. Yeah, you know what? DC Talk, they're a classic. They're a classic group. Anyway, so yeah, I remember sitting across from this kid, Ryan, and he poured out his heart to me and talked about how he didn't have a dad growing up, and because of that, he was angry. He was angry at his dad. He was angry at God, and he trusted me because he knew, he had heard my story that I went through, my parents' divorce, and I was angry about it. I had to work through all the bitterness and stuff. And he heard that story, and that he was able to then have confidence and trust that I could relate and I cared. And that opened up this door, and he really started to grow and to change. And I thought, okay, now I get it. It's not about qualification. It's not about knowing all the Bible verses and having all the songs and, being a youth group all-star in high school. It's really about our experiences and our heart. And I was able to offer him hope and understanding because of what I went through myself. And so don't let the sense of insecurity or not feeling qualified or not feeling like you're strong in Bible, or you went through a very messy family upbringing or a divorce or whatever, don't let that make you feel disqualified, that God can't use you. That's the opposite. In fact, he uses our pain, he uses our struggle, he uses our disappointments and disillusionments to help other people discover their purpose and their calling. So I just want to encourage you with that. So go ahead, Lincoln.
Yeah.
Take it away.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in briefly on that. I wanted to, when you talk about, qualification, I just want to share something with you guys really quick. When I was growing up, we grew up a Methodist, so we had a Methodist background. And my dad would always tell us, you got to go to church. This was after my mom had passed away, and he was like, you got to go, you got to go. But to me, growing up, it was, I wasn't really that in tune. I wasn't really, we grew up, it was a Christian home that we grew up in. Both our parents were there. But after my mom passed away, I was so upset and so bitter and questioning God on a lot of things. And as I grew up, and fast forwarding now to my wife and I, where we are at church right now, we had never volunteered or anything before in previous churches that we had been a part of, and we would always say, we can't really connect with anybody, and it was because we didn't get involved, so it was our own fault. And then we came to our new church where we are now, and I by no stretch of the imagination would I say that I am a scholar in the Bible or anything like that, and this was typical, like Dave was explaining. I have to go and study, in every situation in life. But the pastor and other people and the leaders in the church came to me and they said, Lincoln, we want you to lead a small group because we see something, that you have, and we want you to lead this small group. And I was totally blown away. I was not prepared, not qualified, not educated enough in the Bible to really say that I'm going to lead a group of other people talking about God. That was not an expertise for me at all. And I was like, God, again, why are you calling me to do this? I mean, I am not comfortable at all in this area. And, we said yes. And it has been such a wonderful experience because I'm learning so much from so many other people within the group, and really the only thing I am doing, and I belittle it, but it's facilitating the conversation that we have as a group, and going out in the community and doing things like there's because I talk with other business owners, there's community projects, there's things that are happening around, and we just get together, we jump on it, and we go and do it. We have fun, and we're praising God at the same time, and we're sharing, and we're meeting people, and it's just been such a fascinating experience for me to really to see community through a group that of different people with different backgrounds that have been through so much in their lives, and we have just been sharing this with each other. And I know that I say it every single day, God, I am not qualified to be in this position, but God calls unqualified, who the world thinks are unqualified people, to do his work and do his will. And I just wanted to share that story because I know everybody on this webinar, it's a part of this webinar, have that calling on their life to do something that can change lives.
Awesome.
Yeah, just something to add based on what Dave and Lincoln said. I think I have similar stories that I can share as well, but I think really the key thing is the desire, the heart. God looks at the heart and says, why are you trying to do this? Is it for your own glory, or are you here to seek my kingdom and expand my kingdom? And I think when you have that strong foundation, I think that really makes all the difference, because God will provide you with the tools, the mentors, the people around you to make that work. But unless you have that strong conviction, strong foundation, this is what I was called to do, then it will be very hard to actually go through that entire process. So, I'm 27 years old, and last year I published my first book, and initially, I thought that was a very ridiculous idea because I don't have all those, experiences, all these insights. But deep within my heart, I've had this irresistible desire and say, there's some reason why I want to write this book. I don't know why, but it's there. And I felt like if I didn't respond to that desire, I was doing a disservice to God. So after talking to a lot of friends and family members, they encouraged me, say, your voice needs to be heard, and there's a reason why you want to write this. So that's what I did. I just wrote the book, and it was part of my gift set and strength, so I wanted to maximize that. So all of you have different gift sets, different strengths, and think about not about all these qualifications, because the world demands qualifications, whether it's a new job, they're going to look out for whether you have these certifications or degrees, but it's really about praying to God and saying, if God, this is the path that you have paved out for me, please show me the way. And really building that relationship, I think, is really key.
Well said.
Absolutely.
And good quote from Matt, from one of our participants, that he said that a saying around our church is, God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. And I was thinking that same thing. That's a phrase I've heard for a while now, and it's so true. It may seem a little trite or oversaid, but it's a truth, and it's all throughout Scripture. That, in fact, it seems to me that God chooses the least qualified people to change the world. That Jesus chose his disciples, and they were, very ordinary people in that time, in that age, and some were, considered, very, just outcasts, tax collectors and zealots. And yet that's who Jesus picked, because, again, it's all about your heart. It's all about your willingness. So here's the truth. God has deposited within you everything that you need to fulfill the calling and purpose he has for you. We don't have to go find it. It's not some pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. It's not. It's going to be written in the sky, and the stars, and alignment of the stars, and it's going to be something that just kind of clicks. It's within. It's within you, because you are made in the image of God. We are image bearers of God. So he's placed within us everything that we need to fulfill the calling and purpose he has for us. Now, granted, we need resources. We need other people to kind of help activate that. I kind of use the metaphor of like a fire. If you're camping in the woods and you have a campfire going and you wander off from the main trail to go exploring and you kind of lose your way a bit, what do you do to get back to campsite? You look for the smoke signals, right? You look for those puffs of smoke and try to follow that back to the origin. And I think purpose is kind of like those puffs of smoke. Sometimes it seems a little obscure, a little mysterious, a little like kind of hidden almost. And but ultimately, God's going to lead us to the source, the origin, which is what he's called us to do. It's himself in the life that he's created us to live. And often we discover our purpose one puff of smoke at a time. We read something in a book, and we're like, yeah, that's it. Or we hear a seminar, or we have a conversation over coffee with somebody, and it just clicks for us. I think it was John Eldredge that said that oftentimes destinies can change on such ordinary moments of life. And I believe that's so true. So God has deposited within you everything that you need to fulfill your purpose. How cool is that? So let's jump into what I call the three, or what we call the 3 Ps of calling. And so this is just a little alliteration to help you remember kind of some basic truths on calling. So the 3 Ps of calling, the first P is prayer. It seems pretty obvious, but that's our starting place. That we have to be willing to first pray and ask God to guide us, to lead us in the purpose and calling He has for us. So many people, and I've done this before. I've fallen into this category. Try to forge their path on their own, and instead of first going to God and saying, God, what is it that you want me to do in this season of my life right now? What is it how can I activate my purpose that you've given me to activate right now? And then just wait for Him to show you, to align that to His presence, His Spirit, to give you Scripture through other people, and all like that. We're having a little bit of sound issues. Are you on there, Lincoln?
Yeah, I'm on.
Okay.
Yeah, if we can mute it out.
It's almost like Darth Vader is on the webinar or something.
You can go ahead and
okay. Anybody want to jump into the prayer P?
Go ahead, Paul. You guys hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you want to add on anything to that, guys?
For prayer?
When we talk about prayer, I always just go back to when I was young and when I was a kid. Every situation that my mom took us back to, it led off with prayer. I mean, no matter what situation she was going through, she had cancer, and after she was diagnosed with cancer, her lifespan after that was only about I'd say about 6 months. And she was a teacher, and how I saw her life going, she was so faithful to prayer. I'm talking about every single thing that we did. It was, get down on your hands and knees and pray. And from an early age, she taught us how to pray, and she taught us just to speak, just to talk to God like you're talking to anybody. It was uncomfortable for me, and growing up, I didn't know how this would come into play in my life at all. Now you're talking about small group, and you're talking about business, and you're talking about all this other stuff. And praying for me is like the foundation of everything. What we have to do. I mean, just a conversation with God. And you can see from many scriptures in the Bible where Jesus had to break away, and he had to go out on his own, and he had to talk to God. And that's how we really hear that word in silence. And if I do that every day, and it's the world tries to consume you with so many, pulling you in different directions, but you need to get away to be able to have that silence and that time to talk with God.
Yeah.
I think it's critical that prayer really allows us to see whether or not the dreams and the visions that we have is really aligned with what God wants in our lives. Because a lot of times when I read books around self-help books that talk about developing or finding your dreams or unleashing your purpose, a lot of it is focused on yourself, myself, and say, okay, focused on who you are, what you're good at. But oftentimes, as we talked about this concept of God calling the unqualified, God may have a different plan for you, but just because the world celebrates certain jobs, certain careers, or certain statuses, we are living in that kind of environment that pressures us to say, maybe instead of becoming a social worker, I want to be a pharmacist. The reason why we make those decisions is because a lot of times it's a lot more lucrative and higher reputation job. So without really focusing on our prayer, which is the foundation of who we are as Christians, that's really hard for us to then have the discernment. So prayer absolutely is the first and foremost step.
Yep. Well said, Paul.
Absolutely.
And Christopher, thanks for sharing that. Christopher said in our work group we too have three P's three practices: prayer, performance, and praise. So I'll have to remember that. That's good stuff. So the second P is that of people. And often I find that it's the people around you, whether your spouse or your friends, your church community, your work environment, people that know you, that you interact with, that you rub shoulders with on a regular basis. They're the kind of tools, if you will, that God uses to help pull out your sense of calling and purpose. Because sometimes we don't see it. We're blinded by our own self, if you will. And people can be like, hey, Paul, you're really good at this, and you're a great, encourager. You're really good at hospitality. You make people feel so welcome, or whatever it may be. And I know that's been true for my life. I remember as a freshman in college, I was a music major. I wanted to do music. I didn't know what that meant. In fact, I got a D in my music theory class, so I was like, maybe this isn't the right course for me, the right path for me. But I remember a professor came up to me in the lunch line, and he put his arm around me as I got my process-made spaghetti in the cafeteria that day, and he said, "Dave, I think you would really enjoy speaking and public speaking. Why don't you join my class?" It was like I was a preaching class, actually. I wasn't going into ministry at that point. And I said, but you know what? I took him up on it, and I joined that class, and I remember giving my first talk, and I loved it. I had no idea that I had that within me, and so many people affirmed it. My professor, of course, said, I think this is a big, one of the gifts that God's entrusted you with, and I think you need to use it. So, but I never saw it, and I think people are the tools and the instruments to help us bring out, if you will, our calling and purpose. And then the last P is placement. If you look at your circumstances, your environment, oftentimes those are the factors that forge your calling and purpose. And in fact, there's tons of stories, Abraham Lincoln, J.K. Rowling, C.S. Lewis, that their purpose was really forged in a very challenging environment. I mean, C.S. Lewis was asked by the Royal Air Force in Britain to give talks to the pilots before they would take off in their bomber jets during World War II, and to kind of give them a sense of hope before they took off, before they went into war, knowing that they may never come back. And it wasn't what he had on his radar. He was an Oxford professor, and he was writing his books and so forth, and yet he was asked to do this. He was placed in this environment, and out of that came the book Mere Christianity. Later on, BBC, British Broadcasting, wanted him to do that on radio, and that was turned into a book. So oftentimes our environment, sometimes even the struggling or the challenging environment and the hardships, are really God's way of moving us forward in our purpose. So,
one thing that I like to add to that, the third idea of placement, is what I've found helpful as I was thinking about my life and just trying to see where God is leading me and calling me, is to kind of go through this exercise, and on a blank piece of paper you draw this horizontal line, and starting from the left you create this chronology of your entire timeline from you were born to today, and you identify some milestones, events that happen in your life, significant events or things that happened and shaped who you are today. And as you kind of write down when that happened, think about, what did you really learn? What was the theme behind it? Why did God allow that to happen in your life? Because there is a reason, there's a purpose behind that. And as you kind of go through that process from the beginning to the end, you may notice some interesting themes that emerge out of that. And I think that is a very helpful exercise that helped me to really just be comfortable with who I am, and this is the calling God has placed in my heart. Because deep within myself, before I did that exercise, I always wanted to be somebody else. If I looked at people who are great public speakers, I thought, why am I not that good? How can I become like this person? When I saw someone else who had another talent, then I was like, okay, I want to be that person. So instead of really being myself, I was trying to just copy what other people were doing. And although I think there's value in trying to improve myself, you still have to really understand this is what you're born for,
Yeah.
and you need to really kind of articulate that and put a lot of thought into creating like your timeline and being able to share that as part of your story.
Well said.
Absolutely. Yeah, one thing I just wanted to share and add to that, that that you guys have shared when you talk about placement in your environment. There's a podcast that I had listened to, and I know you guys might be familiar with Michael Hyatt, but there was a podcast that he did, and I'm probably going to type that in the chat box here so you guys can check it out. But it's called How to Discern Your Calling, that podcast. And he had there's 3 circles that he had. One was passion, proficiency, and profitability equals calling. And he goes into break all of that down. Like it has 4 attributes. Is it external? It originates outside of you. Is it personal? It comes specifically to you. Is it appealing? It is something that resonates in you, and it is optional. You have a choice whether to respond or not. And being all of these factors, and the places and the people that we are around, it helps to foster, our calling in life. And a question that I always had. And Chandler, I know you said you saw that podcast, and that was absolutely awesome for me as well, just listening to it. But one question that I always had, and I always question a lot of things. If you guys, and I know you can't see me right now because of the screen, but my palms literally drip water. I mean, literally drip water, and right now they are like sweating beyond control. And when you talk about being in business, talking to other CEOs or other companies and other individuals, and shaking hands and being personable, that was not my personality, or it's not my personality. But because I knew my calling, and I knew where God wanted me, I pushed past all of that stuff. It didn't even matter, and I don't even care about that, because for me to really concentrate on my palms, no matter if they're sweating or dripping or whatever it is, I push past that and say, you know what, I'm not going to be inward focused. It's not about me. It's about what I can do to help everybody else out that's around me, and just bring that passion forth. So I wanted to share that a little bit.
Awesome. Cool. Well, we just have a few more minutes left, guys, and we're going to just continue on, and we'll give some time at the end to ask questions if you have questions. And great point, Valerie, about about Joseph, the power of a calling, insights from Joseph's journey. And that's one of the things I was thinking about, is if you look at the stories in the Bible of people, oftentimes they're faced with these insurmountable odds. Joseph was sold into slavery, and yet because of his humility and his just obedience to God, God exalted him to be second in command with Pharaoh, under Pharaoh, and basically saved the nation, from famine. Nehemiah was a cupbearer. Basically he was the guy that the king said, "Hey, drink this wine, so in case it has poison in it, you're the one that's going to die, and not me." That's what his job was. So he would drink taste the wine to make sure there was no poison. And he felt burdened because of his city, as an exile, as an alien living in, far from his homeland, and his city was in ruins, Jerusalem. And he approached the king, which is a very bold move, and asked him if he could go back to rebuild the city of Jerusalem. So he became an architect. Ultimately, he became just an incredible leader that changed the face of history. So, that's the amazing thing, that, like Paul said, God will place us in a certain areas that you may be like, what am I doing here? This makes no sense. I don't understand God. In your questioning, you're wondering, but He has a purpose for that. So, with that said, we want to leave you guys with some specific actionable steps that you can take to kind of activate your calling and your purpose. So number one is, a calling is unique. A calling is unique. Jeremiah, the prophet Jeremiah, chapter 1, verse 4. God says to Jeremiah, because Jeremiah was questioning, God, I can't do this. I can't be a prophet. I'm too young and all these things. And God said, Jeremiah, before you were born, I knew you. Before you were in your mother's womb, I appointed you to be a prophet to the nations. So that was a very unique calling. And here's the truth. God has appointed us prior to our birth, before we were even in this world, existing in this world. God appointed us to do a certain tasks that he's called us to do, that he's placed within us. So a calling is unique. Your calling is not like my calling or Paul's calling or Lincoln's calling. Your calling is your calling. And that's the beauty of it, because we're all uniquely individuals made in God's image. Number 2 is a calling is external. This is exactly what Lincoln quoted from Michael Hyatt. A true calling will pull you into a larger story. And I think you've maybe hopefully picked up on this theme of it's not about you. It's not about us. It's about ultimately what God's doing, and that being positioned by God to make a difference in the world, to be a blessing to other people. So it pulls you into a larger story. Donald Miller talks about this with excellence in his books, that we are part of this larger story. And he calls that, what he uses from the film industry, that inciting incident, those things that happen that kind of like push you off the path that you're on, and you're like, what is going on? And that is because it's about character transformation. It's about being pulled into the bigger story. Number 3 is a calling makes you feel alive. It taps into your wiring. It's something that you're passionate about. If you wake up and you're thinking about this and dreaming about this, good chances are that is what God has for you to do. Now, you have to hone it and work at it, and it's not going to happen overnight. It's not Justin Bieber YouTube sensation, right? It's a work in progress. And then number 4, and then you guys jump in too, please, I don't want to do all the talking, is a calling is only activated by a choice, really often a series of choices that you are responsible to accept it and then choose to say, yes, God, I want to do this, and go with it. So.
Absolutely. And I know we only have a couple minutes here, so I'm going to be brief. But when you talk about your calling, and I got this from Andy Stanley. And he mentioned someone would always, when he was going out to really discover his calling, he had a mentor that would always ask him, what are you working on that's big? What are you working on that's big? And Andy didn't have an answer, so every time when he would come back, he would make sure that it was something, he had something in place that he was working on big. So if there's ever anything that you guys, something to leave in your mind, is to ask yourself that question: what are you working on big, and add God to that as well, for God.
That's good.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you guys for the great chat. I mean, there's a lot of chatting going on, activity, or good content. People are sharing things. So, great point, Kevin, about that. Talent is no substitution for passion. Well said. Very good.
Absolutely. I guess.
Anybody else have any questions or anything they want to throw out before we conclude for the day, for the webinar?
Thanks for joining us, Kevin. I really appreciate that. I saw you have to go for a 1 p.m. meeting. Thanks a lot for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Chandler, as well. Appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Chandler. Thank all of you guys for being on here today. We really appreciate your time. We know it was in the middle of the day, and we wanted to make sure. But this will definitely be recorded, so we are going to send out the recording link. If you know anybody else that would be interested in watching this webinar back again, definitely forward it over to them.
And we'll be in touch with you guys. Send you some email if you have questions. Maybe you think of stuff later. You're like, before you go to bed tonight, you're like, oh, I wish I asked this, or I wish I mentioned this, or thought of this, please, send it to us. We'll get you guys on our email list, and you can correspond with us. We also have, as Paul mentioned in Lincoln, we offer different services, membership sites, leadership development, coaching. I do life coaching, where I really focus on, this is one of my main areas of focus, where I try to encourage people in their calling, to be all that God wants them to be in life. If that's something you guys are interested in to learn more about, or marketing, please touch base with us. We'd be glad to work with you guys.
Absolutely. All right. Any closing words, guys? Paul, Dave, any closing words?
Well, it's been a great pleasure just being able to be part of this webinar, and definitely look out for future webinars where we'll delve more into this topic and continue to equip you to unleash your calling in the marketplace.
Yeah. And Ryan, yeah, you mentioned, or sorry, Emery Smith, you mentioned about notes will be great to see. Yeah, we can send you guys the note. All of you guys that signed up for the webinar, we can send that as an attachment, and you can have that, so you can refer to it as well.
Right. Yeah. We also have a resource that we're going to send out to you guys that Paul had so graciously put together. So we'll also send that out to you guys too. So thank you guys for joining us today on today's webinar.
Have a good day, guys. Thanks so much.
Take care, guys.
Good day. Bye.
Bye.